Welcome to the Thrive and Shine podcast on behalf of One Day, Day One Coaching. We're here to talk to real people about real issues in health and fitness and provide enough value that you can either help yourselves or others live healthier and happier lives. Let's get into the episode. And we're back, episode 5 of the Thrive and Shine podcast. And look who's back. Richard, nice to have you back. I know we're probably going to touch on this in just a second. And we'll just get straight into it today. So this episode, quite apt for the two of us, actually, to be honest. Maybe more so for you because of what you've been through the last couple of weeks. But it's really about restarting or starting fresh. And is there any difference? I've had loads of experience of this over the years on myself, but also working with various people. And it is quite an interesting thing around people that are starting completely from fresh. They've taken on a change program. But then you've also got people that may have done this already at some point in their life or even recently, and they're restarting. And I find it quite an interesting dynamic around the type of mindset and approach that you get. And is it actually any different? So let's just jump into it. What do you think? Is there any difference?
I think there is a difference. I hate restarting. I find it so difficult. Like any teachers watching this, I reckon you'll hear me loud and clear. Is I work really well in like a 5 to 6 week block when I'm at school because my routine's in place. So I've built myself up over 6 weeks, 7 weeks, whatever the term is. And then it gets to the holidays and I completely lose all that momentum. That routine goes, obviously, everything changes. You might go away on holiday or just, you're out of routine. And then even if it's a week, I just find it takes me so long to get back into it. So I would, for myself, just from a personal point of view, is I think I'd do much better if I just, got that maintenance correct overall in like, not even coming from where I am now, where I've been ill. Starting again after illness is tricky. I think you want to get back to where you were so quickly, and it's understanding your body and whatever you were doing. You need to try and get towards, or you want to try and get towards it as quickly as possible. But it's listening to your body and thinking, actually, I'm not quite ready to either move that amount of weight or run that distance or work, complete that workload at that time. So that can be frustrating. I think really frustrating. And I find that within myself, not being able to achieve the same, particularly like amount of weight lifted or something like that, because I feel that takes me a long time to build over time to increase my strength, whatever. I know that's sort of an obvious statement, but I just feel I find that really tricky to put any sort of extra weight on the bar to then lose that through illness. Is like, oh man, I feel like I'm starting all over again. However, it's probably easier, I think, to come back to it than being in the position of starting fresh, because you haven't got the sort of the fear of the unknown holding you back and all those sort of psychological aspects that are playing with you when you're starting brand new. You, what do you reckon?
This is why I think it's just really interesting, because you can make an argument for either side. I think, and I know, we always use this example, but I should say that I understand it's a simple one to pick on all the time, but it does allow for good context. So when, say, for example, if somebody is, let's say, choose a number like 40 or 50 kilograms overweight, so we're talking a significant amount of body fat. Yes, they're in a potentially terrible situation in terms of their overall well-being. So they're not comfortable, they're not very healthy, and they certainly might not feel happy. So at that point, they decide to make the change. There is, and I have worked with and alongside people that may be in similar situations to this. And so there is a hell of a lot of energy that's, put into the program because they know they want to make that change, right? And so whilst things are difficult, you've got that kind of, I'm talking maybe mindset part at the moment, because yes, things like training and stuff and, changing nutritional habits are hard, but because of that kind of enthusiasm to make the change, that can offset it. On the other hand, when you're restarting, you've done all that, and so kind of shoulders sag to think, oh, I've got to do that again. I think it's probably common if we're talking about, body mass, for example, that when people have a break for whatever reason, that will change, right? So interesting, you're talking about weightlifting, like maybe your muscle mass might not reduce significantly, but the ability for you to be able to do the things that you were doing in a resistance setting does change. So you lose that. And if you think about a percentage, I don't know. I mean, if you've tracked your numbers, you might have seen a 10%, 15%, 20% drop off. It could even be worse than that. And so those kind of things are frustrating because you think you'd built yourself all the way up there. Now you've come all the way back down again, and you know the effort it takes. So that's why I think it's really interesting, because either side, you've got arguments to say, well, you can see why they might find it easier or harder. So yeah, I find it. I don't even know if I've answered the question. I do see what you're saying though, in terms of people that have done it before. They have at least the memory of what it takes, and I think that should enable them to kind of move through the gears probably a little bit quicker than somebody who's starting from scratch, because there's so many things that somebody starting from scratch has to think about and take into account, that if you've done the learning already, you're ahead of the game. So maybe there, if I'm going to, pin my thing to one of them, I'd say that it's harder for people starting, as enthusiastic as they might be, than it should be for people restarting. I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose I was just thinking for a few weeks that you've missed, like, because I've not been for 3 weeks, and I think maybe 4 weeks. So yeah, if that gap was longer, if you think, and again, I was thinking more sort of resistance, and maybe someone who's trained a lot of time and then has missed a period of time. But yeah, if you're thinking about someone who was overweight, worked really hard to get some progress going, and then has come out of that environment for maybe it's months, maybe getting closer to a year or multiple years, yeah, maybe them returning, that probably has a much, maybe that's much more difficult than a comparative new beginner, because they have already done it and seen it, how difficult it is, and then put that weight back on, and then they're back in that cycle. And I think that does happen with a lot of people, doesn't it, who go on sort of, whether it's, I don't know, Slimming World Weight Watchers or whatever, they do really well, lose the weight, and then tend to, I don't know, that's maybe a generalization, but people who do then put the weight back on tend to increase the weight more than what they had previously.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some stats on this. I haven't got them to hand, but there have been some research papers on that. And it kind of makes sense. So something I was going to say a second ago, one of the things, so with training, so resistance training was a good example, actually. And you're right, a couple of weeks off, and say for me, after the half marathon that I did, I pulled my hamstring slightly, then my calf went. And so I haven't been training at the same intensity as I was before. So yeah, about 2 or 3 weeks probably of a drop off, but the gap's probably not big enough for me to completely lose all of the kind of emphasis that I might have had before. But nutrition is one of the ones that I think is probably the most affected by that, because even for me, and I don't know, people might be like, how can that be? But I'm just being honest. Even as somebody who's a qualified nutrition coach who understands the principles of macronutrient splits and all that kind of good stuff, if I spend a few weeks completely away from that setting and I just eat what I want and indulge, or it doesn't even have to be gratuitous. I don't have to be sitting here stuffing my face with 7 large Dominoes. That's not what I'm talking about. But even if you're not focused on your plate size and proportions and stuff like that, it's really easy to move further away from how you were, that equilibrium, I should say. And so now you're in that kind of fat mass kind of gaining situation where all of a sudden, not only are you not maintaining what you had before, but you're now starting to put the pounds on. And so, yeah, back to the point around that it happens. Yes. And I think that's potentially, one of the biggest, I guess, hurdles that people face. It's being able to remember what it's like to live, how you live to be able to get those results. and how easy it is for people just to kind of lose that. Which I suppose leads us really nicely into the next bit. And we're going to get straight into this, actually. So for us, there are 3 key areas then, taking into account everything that we've said. How can people really prepare themselves, or what can they do in terms of a strategy? What kind of things should they think about in order to mitigate this? So whether you are somebody starting again after a little break, or you're somebody starting from scratch, then these are the 3 things that we think, and they are compliance, accountability, and sustainability. They're the 3 areas that we think people should focus on. So we're going to jump straight into that.
Yeah, compliance, or we've spoken about it before as a consistency as well, but I think the word compliance sprung to mind for me about ensuring you are compliant with your own aspiration of training, being consistent, whatever it is, whether it's getting in the gym, going for your run, doing your yoga, whatever, but just having that compliance to, and that kind of agreement with yourself that you are going to go and do it. And I know that, so it's easy to say, and people, I'm going to train 3 times, 3 times this week or 4 times this week or whatever, but it's doing it is the hard bit. And as soon as you miss a couple, you might miss one. So there's, I can't remember who said it. It's a famous quote from someone, but never miss twice. So like if you let's not double down on the negative. If you miss one training session, right, just make sure you get the next one in. If you miss twice, you are, you're on that way, that slippery slope down. I've not been at all this week. I'll start again next week. So let's ensure that you're compliant, 90% of the time. Make sure you get in the gym. So for me, being compliant, write it down as well. So part of a study that was done and some research, again, I'm no good at remembering where I've either read or heard these, but is to write down where you're training. So where are you going to train? What time it's going to be? What is the training going to look like? And if you can put a name of a person who's going to be there with you, then you're much more likely to go and achieve your training session. So it might even be like, I'm going to do, I think it might have been Atomic Habits or something with James Clear. Maybe I heard it on that. So, but that, one of those habit, called The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg. 2 really good books, but it's writing down like, I will train at 6 a.m. Write the name of the gym down, whatever gym you go to, and I'm doing a push or pull or leg session, whatever it is that you're doing. And I'll be meeting, whoever, best friend at the gym at that point. So doing that, really clearly marking it out, it prepares you so you're more likely to go and be compliant there. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one, because it sounds so obvious, doesn't it? But equally, it should also be obvious why people struggle with it, right? Because for most people, like the best example I can use for this are bodybuilders, right? I know that they track in terms of like lifts and like the actual weight that they're pulling, pushing, whatever it might be. I know that they do that. But they're so metronomical in, what when they're training, what they're literally specific body parts and blah, 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 that they've done, the compliance bit is now done. They've done the hard work. But actually, if you spend enough time talking, and I've got, friends who are bodybuilders, and I watch a lot of this sort of stuff. I do like watching all sorts of areas of health and fitness just to try and understand what they do. And what you end up realizing is that a lot of it is, there's a lot of commonality between it. And so, yeah, some of these guys, when they first started, probably were that prescriptive in terms of literally writing down to the point, exactly to what you said, like what day it is, what time it is, where they're going, the specific body parts, even down to the specific lift and whatever. So they don't leave anything to chance. Because the issue is that if you just walk into, and we're using the gym as an example, it could be anything. But if you just say you're going to go and do something and it's aimless, then you're also giving yourself an opportunity to kind of duck out or to veer off the road and go, oh, well, I've done enough there. Whereas if you say you're going to do this and you've listed it out and it's exactly to the point of what you're expecting from yourself, then the only success is meeting all of that, right? So if I know I've done all of that, then I have been successful. And so building those kind of patterns and behaviors will then lead to, and that's the theory, that it will then lead to those overall outcomes. And there's a guy, and this is a complete random one, but I do watch, and my wife always takes a mick out of it for it. And strangely, I probably watch more of this when I'm in a calorie deficit. But I do watch these food, challenge food eaters on YouTube. So there's me on like minimal calories a day, watching somebody stuff their face with probably more food than any of us need to eat. But there's one guy, Randy Santel. He's probably one of the more famous ones in that kind of circle. And he has got quite an interesting kind of way of going about this. He does it in like seasons. It's a career for this guy, right? So what he does is he goes on the road for how many ever months of the year. I don't know if it's 6, but let's say it is 6. So he goes on the road for 6 months and he just eats for 6 months, right? And so his weight balloons up hugely because he's pretty much doing all of these, volume food challenges for 6 months. And then the other 6 months he spends coming back down again, right? But the reason why I'm bringing him up because it was quite apt to when you were talking about compliance. He has a specific method that he follows. And so even though he's been doing this for years, he still follows this method. And I don't suppose we need to go into the intricacies, sorry, get my teeth in, but he has got a literal timetable that he puts on the wall, and he's made like a game out of it, like a bowling game. And he's got strikes and spares and this kind of stuff. It's quite quirky, but effectively it's exactly what you're saying. He's got what he expects from a day, and if he achieves it fully, he gives himself a strike. And if there's anything missing, like something can happen in life where you just don't quite meet your target that day, and there you go, and then he gives himself spares and whatever. And the idea is to collect points. So this is a game that he's created for himself, but effectively what it's doing is driving his compliance towards that weekly, monthly, and then clearly the 6 monthly goal that he's got. Really interesting way. The underlining in bold, italics, and all that kind of stuff is that even somebody who's a seasoned professional at something has to have that compliance in order for him to achieve the things that he wants to achieve.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads us really nicely onto accountability. Okay, so I'm going to tee this one up for you, and I'll be interested to hear your thoughts on it because, again, we've got experience probably of this across a wide range of areas within fitness. Accountability, I would look at as two things, which can be the same thing if somebody's kind of able enough. But I think there's your own holding yourself accountable, but it's then where else can you get accountability from? Some people get that from, whether it's a PT, a coach, friend, whatever, I don't know. But they're the two areas of interest for me, is how you can hold yourself accountable. We've got one bit in there, and there may be some others that we can tease out now. But then also about how you find accountability elsewhere. So yeah, what have you experienced and what have you seen around accountability?
Easiest one is, you training buddy. I've seen really good PTs that are, they might just be in their own gym, or they're a gym that works in multiple gyms. But I've seen them, putting out the call for training buddies. I will do, if you come and be my training buddy at this time, I'll plan all the sessions. But I need you to be there because that holds me to account to get in the gym. And they are, that's their livelihood. If they're not in shape, they're not going to get business. So their whole livelihood is built around being in shape, but they still, they still need a person, or maybe it's a group of people of a particular age group or demographic or something like that they go and join to ensure that they are, that kind of they've got someone else to be accountable for. And I think that's the easiest way. A lot of people have success obviously having a PT. because it is, you are then faced with, I'm going to be in trouble if I don't send them my whatever my food diary. If I don't get in the gym for this one, then you've got that awkward moment where either you have your face-to-face session and have you done this? No, and you're a bit sheepish, or whether it's a phone call or online or whatever it is. There's that awkwardness where it's either I'm paying for this and I'm just lying about it, so what's the point? Or I'm paying for this, I'm not doing it, and I'm honest about it, and I know I'm going to I know the messages I'm going to hear. So, yeah, a lot of people have great success, going to find a good personal trainer or gym instructor who's going to hold them to account. I use people in the gym as well, just so they're not necessarily training buddies. There might be people I knew before the gym, like from outside the gym, friends or colleagues, people I play football against or whatever, or just people that I see regularly in the gym, the one that you can say hello to or whatever, and that's that. You don't even know their name, but you're right, mate. I use them as a bit of an accountability measure as well. As they need to see me in the gym, or they're going to pass some judgment. He's not up to it. He's not in today. Whatever it may be, and obviously they're not, but I can kind of put that personality onto them and say, right, I've not been for now. I think it's 4 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks anyway. So yeah, there'll be people in that gym talking about me. Oh, he's not been in, he's not doing that, blah blah blah. So I found that quite useful because I train at 5 a.m. if I do train, and it's hard to get in at that time. So yeah, having those other people that you can sort of say hello to has helped. Yeah, they're my kind of three, I reckon.
Something you just said, it really interests me because I think, so if we were to take a few steps back, so for me, what accountability is about is, imagine there's a line, right, in terms of being comfortable and being uncomfortable. Accountability sits just above the uncomfortable line, right? Because you could look at this in lots of different ways. People use MyFitnessPal to track their nutrition, okay? Then there's been quite a bit of talk around it kind of facilitating negative behavior towards food, okay? Because some people take it too far, and it can, maybe lead to things like eating disorders if you then become compulsively obsessive about what you're doing. So that line of accountability clearly disappeared. It's gone. You've gone way onto the horizon in terms of what it's supposed to be used for and how it's supposed to be used. Equally, the same, you can now apply that to absolutely anything. The self-talk thing that you were talking about, for some people might sound destructive, but for you, it sits on that line of being uncomfortable that you're thinking like that, but it's enough for you to be able to do something about it, but it not to derail you. So I think that's the key thing for me, is if somebody's trying to find accountability, it's where does that sit? I have been able to learn now after many, many years that I can get training. I don't necessarily need somebody to tell me to do certain things. However, I know I still need help in other areas. So nutrition wise, and again, it might sound ridiculous that somebody who's a qualified coach needs MyFitnessPal. Like, surely don't I know? But I don't use it because I don't know. I use it for the accountability part. I don't need a coach to tell me that I maybe have gone over my calories and stuff like that, because I can do it myself. Whereas somebody that maybe is starting from the beginning, I can see how maybe it would benefit them to have a coach rather than just be left alone with MyFitnessPal and all the things that comes with. Maybe you need somebody there to be able to then have rational conversations with you. So for me, and it might be an oversimplification, but accountability is really about that line. And where do you sit within that? If you're using measures to hold you accountable that are far too comfortable for you, then I would challenge and say, I don't know if that's going to help you. Because if it's too comfortable and it's easy, like what you're doing and how you're holding yourself to account isn't really pushing you, and it's not making you think about what you're doing, then I'd say you maybe need to try a little bit harder, and you need to look for something else that will help you to hold yourself accountable, whether that's people or things, or like you creating personas out of random people in the gym. I don't know, but yeah. So practically, I think there are obvious things that people can do. And I think you've touched on some of them. I do advocate finding like-minded people. I think that's probably one of the biggest ones, especially if you don't know them as well. I think there's something quite cool about a new relationship in fitness, say like in the gym, beg your pardon, where you're kind of coming up together in your journeys, and pushing each other along the way. Equally, if you've got long-standing relationships, that's also great. But I am an advocate of finding new people in the field that you're trying to apply yourself in, and using those relationships to benefit yourself. So
yeah, it's the social, isn't it? I think that's what we're getting down to. Is that's simplest way is to have some sort of social component to your training as well. Will hold you more accountable, which in turn will lead on to more compliance, and hopefully then guide you towards the outcomes that you're after.
Absolutely. And it's like anything in the world. Like if you have an idea, but you keep it in your head, it's like what we said earlier about compliance. I mean, those two things go together quite nicely, but you can easily sack it off and just pretend you never had the thought if you've kept it in your head. But once it materializes and you now start telling people, and that in itself will hold you to account, because, random, but you might speak to somebody about something, they see you 6 months later and they're like, oh, how's that thing going? And you're like, oh crap, about that, I'm not really doing that anymore. Or do you know what I mean? Like if you started a fitness program and again you see somebody 6 months later, it is one of those things that once you start telling people, sharing, and you make it more of a social event, then you are giving yourself the best chance to hold yourself accountable. It doesn't mean people are going to do it, but it is infinitely better than, probably not infinite, that's an exaggeration, but it's a lot times better. Okay, so the last one then, if we're bringing these three things together, is around sustainability. For me, this is the thing that I personally feel like causes some of the biggest problems that people have, because I reckon people can start with the greatest intentions. They can create an element of compliance. They can create an environment of accountability. But if what they're doing is not sustainable, then it only lasts for as long as, that set period. They say we're doing something for 6 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever. And then after that, gone. So, yeah, talk to me about sustainability.
What you just said made me think about the willpower, that you can only get so far on willpower alone, and you need to have a plan and all that put in place as well. So, yeah, once that initial, we've spoke before about the new year, but the rush, the enjoyment, the everything that goes with beginning something new, once that all wears off and then your willpower's drained for whatever reason, it becomes difficult. And if it's not something you're passionate about, or it's one of 4 or 5 or 6 things that you're trying to juggle, it's really easy to just let it slide. For me, I think sustainability, taking it like having a broader view of what you're doing. So yeah, I've spoken about in compliance, and hit as many as you can. Don't never miss twice. Keep the streak going of your sessions, but equally have a look at your workload across a 2, 3, 4 week period, maybe even bigger than that, 2 or 3 months. How many times have you achieved your workout session, whatever that may be? How many times have you hit your calorie goals, so that you start to really gain success? Links back to what we've spoken before about the children, having, they want success. Once they're successful, they'll do more of it. It's the same with us. You've got to build some success in. So if you have a week where I've only been once, zoom out a bit further, have a broader view of it, and see, well, what did I do the week before? What did I do the week before that? I've hit my goals really regularly, and I've just had a bad week. Well, start the next day. Let's not miss again. So there's always that opportunity. But if we just focus on, the latest bit of information, the latest data point we've got, and that's a failure, it's really easy to then go, oh, nah, not for me. So yeah, I think having a much broader view of what you're doing, the zoom in, micro, right? Can we plan the session? Zoom out. What's the big picture look like? How well am I doing? Maybe just adjust your goals as well. Right? Actually, I've not ever been in the gym 4 times a week. Oh, we'll make it twice, then overachieve, and then make it 3. Make it achievable so that you're successful. And I think everyone's going to do more if they're successful and feeling it rather than, oh, I've not made it again. That's not going to be helpful.
And I don't know if it links directly, but something that made me think, because for me, the worst kind of plan or the worst approach, and I know that people say, oh, there's no such thing as good and bad, but I have a real issue with pure fat loss programs for this thing in particular, that they are so short term. Even if you're talking about a big loss, which might take you a certain number of months or potentially even a year or so, what next? And so for me, that's where this fits into around sustainability is there a what next? And if there is, that's going to help you. If there's a long-term plan that all of these short-term things fit into, then you've got your what next. And if you have a bump in the road, or if you have, a period of time off, you're kind of still heading towards this direction. And I think fat loss alone, whilst it might be relevant to some people, like if you're in a particularly difficult situation where the loss of body fat is going to help you, like health-wise, you might be in some critical health condition kind of situations, then I get that. But I feel like there has to be more to life than that. And if we discounted only for the purpose of this discussion, if we said anyone who has to lose weight for health reasons sits in a kind of portion to themselves to the side for a moment, then everyone else is in a completely different situation entirely. And so if you're not really, if you're not in any critical health conditions, but all you're doing is trying to lose a bit of body fat, there's always going to be this issue around what next. So I think for me, in terms of sustainment, is to have more of a holistic goal, more of a purpose to what you're doing. I personally am an advocate really of people trying to find hobbies that are fun, that are in the fitness industry. And they could be anything. It's, I weight train, I love triathlons, running, but not everyone does. But equally, there are loads of other things out there that people might not have realized could really fit into what we're talking about. And I think part of the problem is that a lot of the fitness industry is quite narrowly focused. If you go to find an online coach, the chances are they're going to do your nutrition for you and they're going to write you a gym program, right? No one's writing programs to go and walk the Peak District, or do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't exist, or at least I don't think it does. It probably does, but you know what I mean? Like most online coaches, they prescribe a very specific way of training. It's going to be resistance training led for good reasons, because it is the best bang for buck for you, especially if you're the type of person that we're talking about. But I think if people are looking to start again or start from fresh, for me, the easiest way to sustain everything that we've spoken about is to apply it to something specific. So whether that's, taking up running and you're going to, try and do a park run first and build up and blah, 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 or whether you're going to try and kayak, I don't know, anything, but it to have a purpose so that you can actually, focus your training, your nutrition and your well-being to that, rather than the only thing you're concerned about is fat loss. And then as I said, my question will be, well, what next?
Yeah, purposeful is important. I suppose when we're chatting about resistance training, the purpose I have is, I enjoy doing it, and you were saying the same with triathlon or whatever. Me, from being young, I've always had an active life, and that's part of growing up. So it's always been part of what I have done. So I suppose, people that haven't done that and are getting into it, building in those little goals to hit the milestones, park run or a long walk, 10K, 5K, whatever, half marathons, having those little mini milestones along the way, build into that adherence to your training plan, definitely.
Yeah, because I think, like I say, the issue, this is one of probably like my biggest bugbears around the industry, is it kind of assumes that everyone wants to lift weights. And the fact is that not everyone does. They might eventually end up like that. I've known loads of people that have not started off wanting to lift weights, but as you start to become fitter and you start trying new things, lo and behold, resistance training starts to become a bit more fun. I suppose it's not fun if you've never done it before and you're not really comfortable in your own skin at the moment. Then, going into a gym, lifting weights and things like that, it's not for everyone. But so for me, as I said, just to like cap off, that's really it. It's you don't have to pick one of these things that actually might not be sustainable for you in the long term. Why don't you find it first? Spend some time trying to work out what exactly it is you do enjoy doing and turn that into an active hobby. And I'll guarantee you there's going to be something out there in terms of an event or competition or whatever, where you can actually apply what you do, so you can challenge yourself, rather than jumping straight into something that you just can't sustain. You can't sustain going to the gym 5 times a week for the rest of your life. You're not going to do it. I can, because I enjoy training. You can, because you enjoy it. But not everyone can.
3 times.
Mate, I'm not even gonna lie, I'm 2 times a week. So I said 5 for effect. Fantastic. Good stuff. Enjoyable as always, Richard. We're going to be back again next week with the next one. But for now, that's us.
Lovely. Thank you very much, mate.